Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I'm super excited to be here. We're going to be discussing about page experience. My name is Alberto Medina. I'm a developer relations engineer at Google. And I work in areas that have to do with performance and user experience. And I focus a lot on the area of WordPress specifically. And I'm going to be joined by my colleague Anil when we have the Q&A session. So this is going to be great. Before we start talking about the subject, I would like to mention a few things. The session is recorded, and so you can come back anytime and watch it. Hopefully this is something good, so focus on paying attention, and then you can always come back and get more details. There is a blue Ask a Question button to submit questions that you may have. So please feel free to do that. And at the end of the event, you will see a feedback form. So please share your feedback with us. That's very useful for us to see, if the content was useful to you, how can we basically bring more content like this to you. Just like a brief agenda. So the purpose of this session is for us to discuss and understand what page ranking is. It's, the new page ranking signal that it will be coming to Google search in June, around June. And that is the main purpose of this. Let's talk about what that is. I want to see, for us to learn how to reason about page experience in practice. Like, should we think about page experience? What tools are available there for us to measure and also help us to achieve the right levels of what is called core web vitals that are related to page experience. And then at the end of the session, I compile a bunch of links that are going to be very useful for you to go ahead and learn more and dig deeper into this fascinating area. Okay. So let's start by first, nailing down what page experience ranking is. As I'm sure most of you know, Google search ranking systems are made up of a set of optimization algorithms or optimization signals that are intended to be able to give you the most useful information and the best information that when users are looking for things on the internet. So this search algorithm looks at many factors. For example, the queries of the words of the query that was typed by the user, and the relevance of the page, how many links point to the page, and so on, the expertise of the sources. And there is a new page experience ranking signal that seeks to incorporate the notion of user experience to the results that you get. In a nutshell, when we think about page experience, basically the metric says the following: everything else being equal, if we have two pages where everything is the same, the page that has the better page experience should rank higher on Google search results. And if you think about it, this is common sense, right? Because the offering a better user experience is good for the users, and it's also good for you as a publisher. It's also good for the advertiser, and it's also good for the ecosystem as a whole. So this is the purpose of the page experience ranking signal. Now, you may have heard that the page experience signal is related to what is called the Core Web Vitals Initiative. And then the Core Web Vitals Initiative is an initiative spearheaded by Google that basically seeks to provide unified guidance on quality factors that actually influence the experience of users when they access web pages, right? So basically, Core Web Vitals encompass three things. First, a set of metrics that can be tracked during the execution of web pages. And there are user-centric metrics, which means that they seek to capture user experience, the things that cause users to feel joy or frustration when accessing web pages. The second aspect is tools that allows us to either measure how our core web vitals are behaving in our site, and in some instances, to automate the factors that influence the emerging of these core web vitals in our sites. And finally, is the area of incentives, right? So that we have clear goals on what to strive for. And for example, the page ranking signal is an incentive, right? If you basically have good core web vitals and the other signals that compose the notion of page ranking, page experience ranking, then you will have that boost in the ranking of your pages. Okay, so we are going to talk a little bit more on the area of metrics and tools, because the incentive is also something that is out there and we just want to achieve it. Now, I said that the metrics aspect of the Core Web Vitals initiative and the page ranking signal have to do with how users perceive the experience when accessing our web pages, and how user experience manifests, right? So it manifests during load time, like when the user is asking how fast this page loads into my device, right? So the longer the time that it takes, the lower the user experience. The interactivity is another essential metric, like how long does it take before I, as a user, can interact with the content of a web page. The other important metric is content stability, which says how stable or unstable the content in my page behave, right? Sometimes most of you have experienced probably in one way or another when you access a web page and then you are engaging with the content and suddenly the content moves around. So content stability seeks to measure that. The more stable the content, the better. And the other aspect is user friendliness, right? So is the page mobile friendly? Has features that actually enhance quality experience? They use secure browsing, safe browsing, and so on. Those kind of metrics that have to do with how user-friendly your site is. So all these metrics are grouped together, and then they become what is called the page experience ranking signal. Now, the interesting thing to understand is that if you think about it, we are saying that Core Web Vitals are metrics associated with a page. And that's true. They are page-level metrics. And in a way, then, if you take into account all the pages of your site, then they are a site-level kind of metric. However, so it seems then that us as site owners have the whole responsibility. Okay, no, I have to take into account everything so that I can get good Core Web Vitals. But the challenging with this is that there are many factors influencing the values that we see in Core Web Vitals. And some of these factors are under direct control, and some of them maybe not. And in order to reason about it, I like to think what I call the components of the web experience serving pipeline, right? So when there are a lot of components that are involved between the sending of the page that you created, that is your site, to the moment in which it displays on the user device. For example, on the hosting side, you have the infrastructure that the user, that hosting provider uses, the core of the platform. For example, if you are using WordPress, what is the WordPress core version that you are using? What extensions are you using, plugins and themes? What are the quality of those extensions? What are the optimizations that the hosting provider does automatically for you? Then you have the network, right? Depending on the network that is being used to access your web pages, the value of the Core Web Vitals may vary. So if you are using, if your user is accessing your pages for a slow network, then there could be an influence there as well. If the pages are being served from like what is called a content delivery network, which basically is a component of the system that seeks to bring pages closer to the end users, then this also could influence the value of the Core Web Vitals. And then on the client side, you have factors like the device that the user is using at the time. Like, is it a cheap phone? Is it an expensive phone? Is it a desktop? What is the browser that the user is doing, since that may certain features available or not available. And at the end, then you have the page. And the page is composed by all the things that were put in it by the core and the extensions and the optimizations that were made when the page was produced. So you can see there are many factors. And then we could actually put all these factors into what is called a cause and effect diagram. Usually it's called a fishbone diagram because it looks like the bones of a fish inside. But the point that I want to convey here is that you can see on each of these categories factors that actually are going to influence Core Web Vitals. For example, in the hosting provider side, what is the server capacity that your site is using? You have a tiny server that is being shared, that may cause an effect. is caching being used? As I mentioned before, what are the optimizations that are used? And the same, you can do the same with each of these categories and identify several factors that actually are related to Core Web Vitals. I don't want to get into details of each one because it's not necessary, but just to bring the point home that there are many factors influence what you want to see. So this is the first part of understanding page experience and Core Web Vitals. The second part that is very important is asking ourselves, what is the audience of Core Web Vitals? And there are two distinct sets of end users that the Core Web Vitals relate to. On one hand, you have developers, people that have technical skills that they can basically make things, code, and they are the builders of web pages. And then you have what I call the creators of basically everybody else. And ultimately, Core Web Vitals and page experience are the same thing for both, but the way that they need to go about them to succeed is different. Imagine that you are a developer. Most of you, many of you probably are developers, or maybe no. I am, I consider myself a developer, but even for the highest skill developers, the reality is the following. I have to know quite a bit of things. For example, I need to know the concept of critical rendering path. What are the things that slow down the execution of a web page? What is a render blocking resource? And by the way, we also need to have some notion of performance budget so that we know exactly how our site is performing in terms of the velocity and speed of the site and so on. And then we need to do CSS optimizations, font optimizations, JavaScript optimization, image optimizations, and you name it. There are many, many things that need to be accounted and addressed in order for our sites to have good Core Web Vitals. So two things to remember here. Developers are very important because they develop stuff. However, they are by far the smallest audience for Core Web Vitals. And as I mentioned before, achieving good Core Web Vitals, even if you are a highly skilled developer, is still very difficult because of the complexity of web development and all the things that you have to take into account. So then this brings us to everybody else. For everybody else, including myself there, in order to succeed with Core Web Vitals and page experience, I need tools. Tools that help me with Core Web Vitals in two main areas. One is tools that measure and report on the Core Web Vitals on my site, so I can have an idea of how I'm doing. And then tools that help me automate the factors that cause or influence the values that I'm observing for Core Web Vitals. In the area of measurement, there are quite a few tools, very powerful tools that we can take advantage of. And in the area of automation, unfortunately, there are not too many tools, but there are some. And more will be coming to the ecosystem for sure. Now, in the area of measurements, an important aspect to understand about Core Web Vitals is that there are two types of data that is used to compute Core Web Vitals. One is called field data, that actually is actual data computed from actual users accessing your site on the ecosystem, in the web. And this data is obtained from a project that is called the Chrome UX report, that basically, when users opt in to that capability, then the Chrome browser sends performance data anonymized that tells us how the site was performed in terms of the Core Web Vitals. The other aspect of measurement is what is called synthetic data or lab data. And probably you have heard about Lighthouse. And Lighthouse is a tool also developed by Google that runs synthetic analysis of your site. You can do that on your machine, and it gives you an idea of how your site is behaving in terms of Core Web Vitals and gives you some recommendations on things that you could do. Mm-hmm. Now, these two complementary aspects of measurements, you could tap into them in a variety of tools, as I mentioned. You have the Chrome Dev tools that actually you can open it when you're browsing a web page, and then you can see a lot of, if there is a Core Web Vitals section there. There is a powerful tool that is called Web Page Test that gives you a lot of deep insights about how your page is working. There is the AMP Page Experience Guide. We're going to talk more about AMP in a little bit, but there is, if you go to amp.dev/page-experience, then you can basically put your URL there, and there is a lot of tests that are run, and then you get some recommendations how to improve. And then you have page speed insights, mobile friendly search. There is a new Search Console Core Web Vitals report that we're going to talk about in a little bit as well. And some of these tools are overlapping. Some of them are powered by, have features that are powered by the Chrome UX report, bringing field data into you, and others share the fact that they're using Lighthouse, and then to bring synthetic data to your site. Okay. I mentioned the Search Console report. I'm going to provide a link at the end of the session that you can go and read more. But the Search Console report gives you a lot of information of actual Core Web Vitals data for your site and all your URLs. So this is a very good information that you have access to if you are register your site with Search Console. This is the other tool that I mentioned that is super powerful. The web page test is, you can go to webpagetest.org and then you put your URL. There are many configuration options, but it's not too complicated to set it up. And then you start tests, and then the tool runs a deep analysis of your site, and it tells you how you score in a variety of metrics. However, depending on how technical we are, then we can take more or less advantage of these tools. But it's some level of insights for everyone to get. So I highly recommend that you check them out. So these are examples of the tools that are available. Now we go to the area of automation. When we think about automation, then when you think about hosting actually is a tool that users have available to them to solve the problem of how do I get online, right? So all the onboarding capabilities that they offer, the maintenance, and all the deployment, all these features and capabilities that they offer can be seen on the umbrella of tooling. The core of the platform that you are using, either you are using directly the web via a framework like React, or you are using a CMS like WordPress, that is also a tool. They package a lot of information there, a lot of capabilities there that make it easier for you to access the capabilities of the web. And finally, we have the area of extension. As I mentioned before, extensions in a way, like a plugin, for example, a theme, are tools that publishers use to assemble their sites. And also there are tools that are used to develop those extensions. And this is the area that my team focuses on. And in the context of page experience, what we want is what I like to call the page experience plugin. It's a plugin in WordPress which has the value proposition of making it easier for everyone to offer good page experiences on their site. So if you think about such a tool, then what are the kind of features that such a tool would have? Well, what if we have a pre-published checklist, right? That it tells me the things that need to happen and check if I am doing them in my site. And if I'm not doing them, tell them how to go about them. Can you give me some guidance? Can you point me to information? Or in some cases, can you do them for me? And that brings us to the second aspect. I put here AMP-X because most of you know about AMP. I'm going to mention a little bit more about AMP in a second. But what is important is that we want to bring performance and best practices optimizations automatically to users. So we need to bring them and have them all bottled up in a solution. And then in order to prevent plugins to interfering with each other, for example, like you could say, well, I have good Core Web Vitals, but then I install a plugin or I'm using some kind of solution that I don't control and my Core Web Vitals are going bonkers. So that means that we need some mechanism to prevent other components that I don't control to affect my Core Web Vitals. And that should be part of a page experience plugin. And finally, because we need to actually build other extensions that actually play well with the page experience plugin, then the page experience plugin must provide developer tools that others in the ecosystem can use to make their solutions compatible with the page experience plugin. Now, this is currently the page experience plugin is the official AMP plugin for WordPress that my team is developing. AMP, as I mentioned before, I wanted to tell you more about it. I'm sure that most of you know, but AMP is a cost-effective and powerful tool that brings a wide range of performance and best practices in one solution, in a web components library to your site. So that means that if your site is uncompatible, then you have assurance that all these performance optimizations, some optimizations that are going to be there for you no matter what. You don't have to do them yourself. This link here, the first one, the AMP page experience link, is a very good blog post in the AMP site that actually explains to you how AMP actually helps with page experience. So there is a lot of information there to describe exactly what kind of capabilities AMP brings that actually influence Core Web Vitals and page experience. And then we created a video series that we are is almost getting to the final chapter next week on the AMP channel in YouTube that actually explains to you, again, all the background to understand the official AMP plugin for WordPress, and then teaches you how to use it effectively to bring full AMP compatibility to your site. So I highly recommend that you go and see that YouTube series and engage with us in, I'm going to put links at the end so that you can engage with us in the support forum and so on, so that for us to help you with your AMP needs. So the bottom line from this talk then is the following. First, page experience is just a way to bring the notion of user experience into the way that users find information. So we want users to find the best pages. Now, this doesn't mean that if your site or your page doesn't get high Core Web Vitals, then you're going to lose all your traffic. That is not the case. So remember that I said page experience tells us all things being equal, then the page that has better page experience will rank higher, right? That makes sense. However, it doesn't mean that I have the best content and then another page has crappy content, but they have better page experience, and then they're going to rank first. An extreme of this situation, imagine that I have a blank page. A blank page should have the highest page experience in terms of Core Web Vitals, right? Because it doesn't do anything, doesn't have any load, doesn't have any images, and the thing's static. However, it's the worst content possible. So don't be afraid that page experience is going to cause any problem, but it's something that that if you do, your users will be happy and you will be more successful, because that would translate in more engagement, more conversions, and more loyalty from your users. So keep that in mind. The second thing to keep in mind to understand from this talk is that there are many aspects that influence Core Web Vitals. You have the infrastructure that your hosting provider provides, the core of the platform, extensions, the network, the device, the browser, and finally the page. So keep that in mind so that don't feel overwhelmed that everything is your responsibility. So what you have to do is to make sure that with this awareness and this knowledge of all these components, then you will be better prepared to make decisions on how to go about things. For example, if you are selecting a hosting provider for your site, or if you are talking to your hosting provider about the solution that they provide, then you say, well, can you tell me how your solution is going to translate into my page experience or my Core Web Vitals? And then they're going to have to tell you, okay, well, probably then you would have to use this plan that actually has better server capacity and so on. So you will be better equipped to make decisions. You will also be better equipped to make decisions on what extensions do you use in your site. Or, for example, you could say, well, given that the Core Web Vitals space is so complicated, and there are so many things that have to happen, what if I have a tool such as AMP that can help me make all these things happen in my site? Can I go that way? Well, that would mean that then you have to be more conscious about the extensions that you add to your site, because the extensions that you put in your site must be AMP compatible, right? But it would be a trade-off decision. Okay, I put AMP, I have some constraints on the extension that I can use, but at the same time, then I get some kind of assurances of the performance optimization that are going to be in my site. Okay, so that is a very important component. Also, remember that there are different audiences. We are not all developers, and that's good. Most of users in the web are creators, and that is beautiful. That is the power of the web. Developers have a role to play, but we must have a fair shot to succeed, all of us, regardless of our technical expertise or the amount of resources that we have to invest on our sites. So that means that if we are not developers, and even if you are a developer, remember, this is extremely complicated if you are a single developer or so, and you also have to take into care of all the other aspects of your site, like SEO, monitoring, monetization, all these things. Then if you could get help via tools that help you succeed with Core Web Vitals, then you should go that way, or you should think about going that way. And finally, it's important to understand that we need the tools that I just mentioned, and that there are different types of tools for measuring Core Web Vitals. And then we saw some of them. I encourage you to go to the documentation that I'm going to provide you and learn more about those tools, check the Search Console report on Core Web Vitals, and understand clearly what is the information that these reports give to you. And also, there are tools that are required for developers. If we have a page experience plugin, such as the AMP plugin that we have right now, well, what are the tools that I have available for me as a developer to make my solutions compatible with this? So that if the ecosystem is moving to page experience interaction with the page experience plugin, then I want my solution to be compatible with it. Okay. Now, I told you that I was going to give you more information. Here is a learn more section. For example, if you are a developer, the web.dev site, also a Google site, have a section on Web Vitals that is very, very thorough, have a lot of information about all this. I highly recommend it. There is this article about understanding page experience Google search results is very good. I forgot to put the description here, but this is a link that actually explains to you how to understand the Search Console report. This is very good. I mentioned the AMP, the official AMP plugin for WordPress, which could be very helpful for you if you decide to go that route. So this is the plugin site, and you can get the plugin on WordPress.org in this link here. And I also mentioned the video series that we created that is very useful. And also it talks not only about the AMP plugin, it talks about Core Web Vitals. It has good insights on that, and also talks a lot in detail about how AMP helps with Core Web Vitals. So I also recommend that you see that series. And then there are a bunch of blog posts with also information that I recommend you to read. And then remember, that we said that the Core Web Vitals try to seek to capture user experience. Well, here I link documentation and information about these metrics. For example, if we're talking about load time, how fast our pages are loading on the devices of our users, then you have metrics like the largest contentful pane or the first contentful pane. So these links here give you a lot of information to understand what these metrics mean. Similar with interactivity, we had the first input delay, time to interact, and so on, and the same for content stability and user friendly. So this is a lot of information here that I want you to, relax, enjoy, don't feel too stressed about page experience. This is something that is going to be good for you, good for your users, and we are going to be here to support you to this journey via tooling and also via information and education. And this complete, now we're going to have some questions and answers for you to engage with us.
Hey, Alberto. Thank you so much for the valuable session. A lot of information for our users out there. I'm sure that you were able to sort of demystify some of the myths from reality. We've been getting a lot of questions. Before we get into the questions that we've gotten from users, one thing I'd like to call out is that we've seen, initially we'll take the questions that we've seen on the registration form. Then we'll try and address some of the questions that were coming in while you were conducting the training. So I'm excited to take these questions and hear some of your thoughts. Hopefully we can add some value to all the users who've been attending this session.
Awesome. Let's see.
Perfect. I'll start off with the first question, Alberto. The first question is, what happens to resources, third party, that a developer does not have control on? Example, ads and other scripts.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it highlights one of the most challenging aspects of the web, right? That is like if we could only deal with the things that we control, then it would be much easier, right? But the problem is that we have a site that behaves nicely, and then we add one plugin. It could be ads or it could be something else, and then the performance goes bonkers. So the only thing that I can say here is that we need to be very well aware of this, and then we need to be conscious when we make decisions on the components that we decide to add on our site. This is related to what I referred before that says like, well, if I decide that I want to have more control on what goes into my site, and I say, well, I'm going to go with a solution that uses AMP. AMP, despite of having constraints, it has the advantage that prevents others to actually mess with your performance. Now, you need to find solutions that are incompatible. That's one way to deal with resources, third-party resources, so that they don't damage the performance of your site. If the AMP is not a solution that you want to adopt or you can adopt, then make sure that the components that you are adding to your site are actually vetted, that there is good experience reported, and if you see that a solution actually damages the performance of your site, then seriously consider switching. The area of ad is tricky because you may have an ad solution that is very important for you, and even then I encourage you to consider options. But for example, if you are using a forms plugin, right, that is damaging your performance, your core web vitals, then consider using another one that actually is much better. So the important thing that I want to convey here is awareness. Be aware of what you're trying to achieve goes a long way to allow you to make good decisions. Yeah.
So would it be fair to summarize, Alberto, that the control is with the publishers or partners in general, and they should be looking at all the options that are available and choosing the best option that is possible, either to optimize for web vitals or either to optimize for monetization or whatever is the most important?
That's that. Thank you for clarifying that, making it more easy to understand. Yeah, that's exactly right. And also you have to make this trade-off decision, right? You say, well, I'm going to basically choose this is going to hurt my performance, or I'm going to do this. This seems to be hurting my monetization. However, it's going to increase my engagement and my loyalty. Therefore, I'm going to gain here. So all these are factors that are at play here. And then you have, as a site owner, you have to take them into consideration. And on our side, we are going to continue developing guidance, tooling, and making things easier for publishers in general.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Alberto. I think we can move on to the next question. The next question is around rankings in general. So the question that we have is, how do we prevent a negative impact on my revenue when you implement the new search ranking metrics?
Yeah. So as I said at the beginning of the talk, I don't want anybody to be scared about page ranking. Don't think that the page ranking is gonna be rolled out and then you're gonna lose your revenue. It's not gonna work like that. I try to emphasize that page experience ranking, you could look at it as a tiebreaker, right? So, well, if you are producing content about something that you are good at, and that's what your business is, and you have the best content there, then if there is another competitor or another site that has exactly the same content with the same quality, with the same feature and everything equal, and they have a better experience, then they may rank higher. But that is not the case. So you have to focus on all the searching factors. Make sure that you have good SEO. Make sure that you have actually good features for your user, that your content is good. If you take care of your content as a whole, page ranking is going to be a boost for you. But remember, do page experience not only because of the ranking. Do page experience because it's going to be good for your users, it's going to be good for your business, and as an added value, you're going to get a boost on page ranking, on search ranking. However, it's not going to be that if you don't have page ranking good for any reason, then you're going to be lost, okay? So I hope that comes across clear, because I want everybody to feel confident that this is a good thing for them in the long term, and that there is a path to achieve them.
Perfect. I think that's a great way of summarizing and saying that content is still the strong signal when it comes to rankings, and publishers or developers should be optimizing for user experience or monetization, and then worry about page rankings, because content still plays a very important.
Yeah, exactly. Page ranking is a consequence, right? So I think that the most important thing is like user has a principle that I really like, that is focus on the user and everything else will follow. Okay, so that's it. That's my major piece of advice. Focus on your user, your content, and doing the right thing. And yeah, it's hard, but you can do it.
Perfect. I think we can move on to the next question now. Again,
This is the
I
same.
think we've sort of answered these questions. If my
Yeah.
site does not pass CWE tests, will I lose all my traffic?
The answer is
I think
no.
the overarching theme, like Alberto mentioned, is that optimize for content and optimize for user, and the rest of the things will automatically follow. So I don't think we want to get into too much into this question.
Yeah, no.
We
The
can
answer
move
is
on.
the answer is simple. No.
Perfect. Then I think we can move on to the next question. The next question is around tooling, tools that we have for publishers. Alberto, are there tools that can help me succeed with CWE and NPX?
Yeah, so that was one of the main topic of my talk. Is like I talk about that tools are essential to succeed with Core Web Vitals for 99% of people out there. Actually, for 100%, right? Even if you are super high skill developer, you still need tools. And tools are divided into two aspects: tools that allow you to measure what's happening, and tools that help you to automate what needs to happen, right? So, for example, the Search Console report is a tool. You have web page tests, you have dev tools, you have Lighthouse. There are many tools that actually provide you great information. And then on the automation side, there are many tools that, for example, if you are using certain hosting providers, then they may do optimizations for you. And then you have plugins help like the AMP plugin that actually bring a lot of optimization for you. That is a tool. I usually, because my team is the one developing the official AMP plugin for WordPress, and that plugin is going to evolve into like a page experience plugin, meaning that it's going to try to automate and guide users towards getting good Core Web Vitals. If you have the possibility to make a decision to go that route, it would significantly decrease your development and your maintenance costs to achieve this kind of goals. Okay.
Correct. Alberto, would it be fair to say if there is like one particular tool that everyone wants to focus on, would that be those Search Console reports? I've heard that they are quite extensive and provide on-point recommendations in previous months.
Exactly. The Source Console report is good. I think that the more the merrier. I think that I recommend users to basically take advantage of the Search Console report because it brings real user data. But also, when you are developing your site, or if you can analyze your site synthetically on your desk, so to get a sense like, oh, wait a second, I am not doing that bad, so I'm very feeling optimistic. Oh, and then I have to improve this thing. Try to pursue that on the context of measurement, and try to experiment with AMP to see if it works for you. Could you make certain decisions that allow you to become uncompatible, and then you check the performance there, and then you can work with the AMP plugin to actually help you out. All these things are considerations that are important. They could start with Search Console, but I recommend to basically use all the links that we provided at the end of this talk, and then get familiarized with them. Yeah.
Perfect. I think we can move on to the next question now. The question is now around rating, CWE ratings and plugins. Alberto, are there any CWE ratings available on plugins? I think again the question more or less falls back on the previous question. Are there any recommended tools or plugins?
This is a very interesting question and very important, right? Because I think that if I interpret it correctly, is asking, is there any way that I can know the impact on Core Web Vitals that a given plugin will have if I install it in my site? Okay. The answer is no, right? So there are not many, but this is something that actually we want to do. And in the context of the page experience plugin, that is right now is the AMP plugin, but is expanding in scope. Something that we are trying to do is exactly that. How can we check things that plugins do that influence Core Web Vitals, and then highlight them? For example, if you are using the page experience plugin, the AMP plugin, and you want to use a forms plugin, then in the near future, the AMP plugin is going to say, well, this forms plugin actually doesn't satisfy these actually requirements. We recommend that you use this form plugin or another form plugin if you're trying to optimize for Core Web Vitals. If you need this form plugin because you're trying to optimize for something else, by all means. But the short answer to this is no, and the longer answer is that we are working on it, and actually, ideally, this would be a feature of the ecosystem.
Thanks, Alberto. I think we can take the next question that we have. Can you also provide recommended plugins and WordPress themes? Also, please provide a replay so that we can go back over the info. I think the second question you've sort of answered at the beginning, that users can come back and
Exactly. Yeah.
access this session whenever they want. But going back to the question, can you provide recommended plugins and WordPress themes?
Yeah. So the second part of the question also, I recommend the YouTube video series that I put there about the AMP plugin, which has a lot of information about Core Web Vitals and Page Experience and AMP in general. Now, with respect to recommended plugins, there are good plugins out there. However, because we answered right now that there is not a rating system that allows us to see how they behave in Core Web Vitals, the only thing that I can say right now is that if you decide to go with an uncompatible solution for your site, then if you go to the unplugin site, there is an ecosystem section there, and we list all the plugins and themes that we know that are uncompatible. And if they are uncompatible, then that means that then the optimization that AMP brings work with those themes. And there are many good quality plugins there and themes. For example, Astra is one of the top themes out there. They are fully uncompatible. Navy is another one. All the core themes are also uncompatible. So you have a lot of options. So if you decide to go the uncompatible route, then you can go to the plugin site, ecosystem section, and check. The links are provided also in the table here, so they can go for and check it out.
Perfect. I think we can take the next question now. So one of the users' question is, page experience tells me that I have no good web pages despite having one issue. My CLS is aggregate 3.6 and the passing would be 2.5. Why is this a pass or fail metric? Shouldn't I get some credit for passing the other test?
Yeah, that's a good question too. And I cannot get into details of like how the page ranking, that is with this, with the search team. However, if you think about it, right? If you go to a restaurant and you have 5 courses in your meal, right? And the last one is, and one of them is rotten, your user experience is going to be very bad, despite the fact that the soup was extraordinary. So in a way, user experience is binary. Either you have a good user experience or not. However, on the other hand, there might be cases in which probably the user could tolerate some context shifting if everything else is perfect. So in the future, it may become not binary, but again, you should strive for the best user experience to your users. So if there is something that we know that that is actually annoying to your users, then having it there would actually be detrimental for the experience. That is the rationale why it's binary at the moment. But I would not worry about it. And remember, page experience is something that you can use to strive for and keep improving. And it's going to be very satisfying when you see all the green color in all the aspects. You say, well, my users are going to have a good time when they come to my pages.
Sure. I think it's important to call out as well that the metrics are calculated, or CWE metrics are based on the 75th percentile. So
exactly.
Yeah, you have to meet the scores at least 75 times out of 100. So it's not like if the page fails in one particular test, it is carried over as a penalty for the rest of the website in general. So it's important to understand that as long as majority of users are having a good experience, your page rankings or your web vital metrics are still considered to be good.
Exactly.
Perfect. I think we can take the next question now.
Yeah.
When will the core web vitals change take effect?
I think that the announcement, I think that was updated recently. I think that if I don't know mistaken, it should be coming in June, sometime in June.
That's right. The slow rollout is happening in June, and by August, I think it should be fully rolled out based on the blog post update.
Exactly.
Moving on to the next question. What are the pros and cons of using AMP together with AdSense to improve core web vitals on a WordPress site?
Well, the pros is like as I said, AMP is a tool that brings together a lot of performance optimizations and best practices that you can take advantage of out of the box. So that is the pro. Now, AdSense, there are, like, for example, plugins like Advanced Ads or Ad Inserter that actually interact well with AMP. The advantage is that then you can be sure that things are going to be good or at a certain level. There are certain minimum number of optimizations that you're gonna get. AdSense is a product itself, and then there may be formats or a specific ad type that don't work with AMP, and that is something like a con of using them together. My point that I would like to come across here in this question is, if you have the option to actually have a monetization solution that works well with AMP, I highly recommend it, because then you have the performance aspect taken care of for you. Now, if you have a monetization option that actually definitely doesn't work with AMP, I recommend that you engage with us also to see if we can solve it for you. And then at least raise your voice and say, listen, no, I would like to use AMP, but this AdSense problem is actually causing me headaches. Then that would be super useful for us. And then that would, hopefully we will solve all these problems and you're going to be able to use both together happily.
Perfect. I think it goes back to the first set of questions that we sort of answered, where users or developers have to make that choice in general on which one they would like to optimize.
Exactly.
For.
Yeah. And search for alternatives, right? So if you are aware of these things, at least you should think about, do I have another option? For example, I'm using an interstitial ad that is not allowed in AMP. Well, you have two options. Either you dump AMP, or you say, do I have any other option to monetize well that is not an interstitial? The answer may be, of course, look, let's do this, right? If the answer is no, then of course, I don't want you to lose your revenue stream. Then you may have to have a decision. Okay, well, for this page, I don't want AMP. And the plugin, actually, the AMP plugin gives you that option. You can opt out of AMP in certain circumstances. That would be a possibility.
Perfect. I think we can move to the next question. Why is it that Google's AdSense code has a negative effect on Core Web Vital speeds and layout issues like LCP?
Yeah, that is a question that I cannot answer it specifically for AdSense, but I would say in general, as I mentioned before, like achieving good Core Web Vitals is a challenging thing. So it's not an AdSense problem. For if you use JavaScript, you may incur in things that block the main thread, or if you use certain kind of display, you can have content shifting around. So it's very challenging, but I do know that the AdSense team is working very hard to make sure that all the AdSense solutions are as good as possible in terms of Core Web Vitals. So that's what I can say now. I think that remember that the page ranking signal is coming out and things are going to continue improving, and everybody is trying to do the best, so including AdSense.
Yeah. Again, just to call out what you mentioned, Alberto, that the AdSense team is aware about these issues and they're sort of working through improvements on these ads to sort of improve the score. So we should be able to pass on updates as and when we hear from them.
Exactly.
Great. Next question that we have is, again, this is a similar question to what we just answered. Do animated GIFs on page lead to stability issues?
I think that there's no way to details on this. It would be we have to see the page and then see the score and then see if there are many aspects there. But
I think we can move on from this question. We've sort of touched upon ads a couple of times. So next question. Components of pages move when lazy loading. Is lazy loading having a negative effect on content stability measurement? When I did page speed insights, it suggested lazy loading, but I'm confused now.
Well, lazy loading itself does not cause content stability, right? It depends on how you display the information that is being lazy loaded in your page. And that actually brings me to one feature or capabilities of AMP that is very important, that I explained in the video series and also in the blog post that I pointed here, is that AMP has something that is called a static layout system, which means that basically AMP knows from the start where all the components of the page go, right? So, and therefore, when they are lazy loaded, the page doesn't move because the space for that component is already predetermined. So that is an advantage of AMP. That's a good question because it points to the fact that if you have a way to know in advance where every resource go before the resources arrive, then you basically reduce the probability of content shifting quite a bit. But it's not a feature of lazy loading. It's a feature of how content is displayed when it's loaded,
I think the other area that I'd like to call out is that Page Speed Insights essentially looks at the speed or tries to optimize for LCP in general. So some of the recommendations might be very specific to speed. So that's where I think looking at Search Console reports, which sort of provide a holistic view, is more helpful in terms of identifying what partners can do to fix some of the CWV metrics issues that they're sort of.
Yeah.
Next question. Can you speak on interstitial ads and how they affect the user experience calculation?
No, that's something that, that's not, we cannot get into that.
Sure. Makes sense, Alberto. I think I can effectively talk about it because I'm slightly closer to ads.
Yeah.
Basically, interstitial ads match Google standards for avoiding any intrusiveness. We essentially build them to be a non-intrusive interstitial. The recommendation that we've gotten for publishers is that they should be checking the webmaster's blog to identify what is an intrusive ad experience versus what is a non-intrusive ad experience. And going back to what you also sort of mentioned, Alberto, that there are a number of signals which go into page experience calculation. It goes back to the choice of whether the partner or the developer wants to use it or not. So this is sort of reiterating all the 3 or 4 points that we covered on various questions that sort of came up on ads. So I think we can move to the next question now. How do we manage the impact of Google AdSense on our WordPress sites? Time to interactive, and again, these are related to
same question.
Can we take the next question then? Okay. Can the AMP plugin hurt your WordPress template theme? We've had issues in the past with our custom coding.
Yeah, so it's not the AMP plugin itself. Remember that in order for AMP to bring you all the capabilities that it offers you, it imposes certain constraints. For example, all these questions that we have been asking about AdSense is basically, it could be asked in general, right? How do you prevent things bad happening to your site? Well, the only way to do that is to make sure that you don't add bad stuff to your site. And that's what AMP does. So if you're using the AMP plugin and you add something to your site that actually is not allowed by AMP, the AMP plugin is going to strip it out. And therefore, your theme is going to look broken. For example, you have a maximum of 75 kilobytes of CSS that you can use on a page. If your theme adds 200 kilobytes of CSS, the AMP plugin is going to remove it. Therefore, the CSS, the page is going to look awful. But it's not the AMP plugin, is that there are certain restrictions. So if you want to be compatible with AMP, you have to be aware of them and then use only components that are AMP compatible or fix the one that you have to become AMP compatible.
Got it. Thanks, Alberto. I think we can take the next question now. How can you find out what plugins work or do not work with AMP? Is there a list?
Yeah, so I list here in the page here. There is the AMP plugin site. Sorry, this one here, the AMP plugin site. AMP-wp.org has an ecosystem section, and in the ecosystem section, you can find all the themes and plugins that we know that are compatible. There are others in the ecosystem that are not listed there, but you can find quite a few there. And if you have questions, please engage with us in the support forum in the WordPress.org site, and then we can help you out there too.
Great. Next question, please. My page speed insight test is showing good results, score of 98 in lab results, but CWV is showing bad page experience. What should I look into?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. There are many things that could be happening in field data. For example, if your users are accessing your site from a slow network, that would influence the Code with Vitals. There are many factors, so I recommend that you see what the Search Console report is telling you, what kind of recommendations. But it's a good sign that you are getting those good results on the lab. Also, when you test your site in the lab, make sure that you configure the test in a way that is representative of how your users are going to see the site. If you are using web page tests, for example, you can ask the tool to use a cheap device. Most users, 80% of users don't have an iPhone or a Pixel, right? So, taking that into account, configure the test so that you get some more realistic results.
Got it. Moving on to the next question. You mentioned Forms plugin several times during the presentation. We happen to use the Ninja Forms plugin. Do you know if this is a good Forms plugin considering CWE?
I'm not sure about that. I know that they are, if I remember correctly, they are not uncompatible. I know that WP Forms have at least some kind of level of uncompatibility. So in that sense, the WP Forms would work well with AMP solution. We haven't evaluated Ninja Forms in that sense, so I cannot know. Right? But I know that they are not uncompatible, if I remember correctly. I need to check, but...
Got it. Moving on to the next question. After making improvements to my website's page experience, how long will it take for this to be reflected in the Core Web Vitals report in Google Search Console?
I cannot answer that question.
Okay, I think this was the last question that we had at our end.
Yeah, I cannot answer that question because this is a Google search question that is basically, I'm not part of that team and I'm not qualified to answer it. But what I would say is that it's going to be reflected as soon as possible.
Perfect. Makes sense, Alberto. Again, I'd like to thank you for this valuable session. I know that we sort of tried to answer as many questions as possible and we've shared resources. So Alberto, I'll pass it on to you to close out the meeting.
No, thank you, Anil. It has been a pleasure. Actually, I feel that we shared a lot of information and insights about how to think about these things. I hope that everybody that listens to this is excited about the page ranking initiative. And remember, we are here. Let's continue working together.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alberto. I see that we now have a guest appearance behind you as well.
Yeah, that's Dexter.
Amazing. Thank you, Alberto.
Bye-bye.
Bye.